Welcome back to the Wellbeing Room. Today, I'd like to introduce Mira Rao. Mira is a resilience and embodiment coach. And if you're not sure what that means, we'll be unpacking that in our discussion today. Mira lives in Perth in Western Australia. She is a musician and she performs regularly, singing and playing guitar. Mira also loves the beach. And just like me, she has been practicing yoga for 25 years, which she teaches also. Mira loves learning. She studied linguistics and journalism, and she has an MBA and is currently completing her master's in counseling. So Mira's mission is to contribute to building a world in which people are confident in the wisdom of their bodies, are consciously and intentionally resilient, and empowered to live the lives they actively choose rather than reactively inherit. And I think this is a really powerful goal, and I'm excited to talk with her about this today. Mira teaches the people she works with practical ways to develop routines and rituals for embodied resilience. These tools help them work through unresolved traumas, deal better with challenges and stress, and start moving towards what they truly want in their lives. So welcome, Mira, to the Wellbeing Room. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Leah. I'm really excited about our chat today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So much to discuss.
So we've kind of discovered that, haven't we? A lot to unpack and talk about.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start real sort of basic and just ask you what in particular led you to become a resilience and embodiment coach? And perhaps you can tell us a bit more about what those two terms actually mean, like resilience and embodiment, because I think, you know, resilience maybe people are familiar with, but embodiment maybe not so much. And why those two things are actually important for us to live a full and healthy life.
Yep, that would be my pleasure. Essentially, I thought it was interesting you highlighting one of the aspects that we have in common, which is the yoga practice. And I think what led me to start to look really within the field of resilience and the field of embodiment that are both becoming quite developed fields within the psychotherapeutic communities was the fact that yoga was like a window for me. It gave me the experience of like, what does it feel like to feel really good in my body? And from that good place in my body to feel very expansive about my life as well. So in a class or in a practice, I'd be in this beautiful space where I felt really peaceful and I felt really connected to nature or the people around me. Yet when I was living my life day to day, I didn't really find that I was able to access that state and apply it in the micro moments of having an interaction with someone that maybe triggered me or was challenging quickly enough for it to be beneficial. So I started to see that as brilliant, and I still have a strong practice and it's a big part of my world, that you know, yoga's developed for a different time, as we know. So the reality of modern life and the demands that it puts on the nervous system, on the human entity, have really changed. And so it became really clear to me that there were different tools that were going to be needed to navigate this world. And for myself personally, and what I saw with a lot of my clients as well, I used to do a bit of business coaching, was this fragility. So hence coming into the how do I cultivate resilience? Because if we're in the self-development world, or the spiritual world, this idea of like living permanently in bliss, which you quickly learn is not realistic. And then the other option is to be living in your trauma and living in these collapsed states. And then we have this very black and white sense of ourselves as being in one or the other. And I began to realize that embracing all of that, but having this capacity to meet the challenge, step back, find the resources to experience, witness, and encounter the challenge, step back, gather the resources, and then step forward to meet it, was really essential. So very, very related. Basically, how do I do it in a small, practical way? And how do I do it in a way that allows me the breadth of my humanity in a way that's flexible to actually realistically stand up in the face of the challenges that life brings and also experience joy.
So that resilience is that ability to sort of step back and just pause and feel into it and know what to do next, not the next right thing is to do. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, to me, the way I define it, and I have an embodied, of course, way of explaining it. So if this is the entity, this is me, this is you, this is us. going along.
Yeah.
And then life's piling stuff on the top, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's university and stress, and there's relationship, and there's work.
For those listening and not actually watching the video, Mira's got her hands touching each other and she's putting things on top of them. So that's demonstrating the weight that's being placed.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm such an embodiment like nerd. I forget. I'm like, oh, people might not actually see my body. Yeah. So we have this. I'm going to take them off because I'm scared. But essentially that weight becomes quite heavy.
Yeah.
And if the resources underneath here, we might have whatever our tools are, you know, meditation, prayer, and that holds up the other side here.
Yeah. Okay.
When we have a sufficient amount underneath to meet the challenges. So when there's less challenges, we don't need as much underneath.
Yeah.
When there's more challenges, we need a little bit more. If we don't have enough underneath, then
the trap
sorry
doors
for the
open.
noise.
Yeah.
That happens. Yeah. That's trauma.
Things fall
so
apart.
in my definition, things fall apart. And the system is overwhelmed and not able to cope. I really like this graphic description of it. I find it really helpful.
It's like a trapdoor sort of opening and things falling.
Exactly. The trapdoor of trauma. Oh, I like it.
Oh, I like it. There's a blog post in that.
I'm writing it down right now.
Please do.
The trapdoor of trauma. So essentially, you know, through one perspective, because trauma eliminates our capacity to be so resilient. Oh, it can do.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. It's that constant experience of the system being overwhelmed. And as we begin to heal, as we begin to build resilience, then we begin to understand cognitively, emotionally, through the body, what resources do I need to meet this situation and challenge, and how do I get them in place?
Yeah, cool. So I'm curious, and when you say you're an embodiment coach, like, what does that actually mean? Like, are you teaching people to feel their bodies?
Pretty much.
People who have no idea. Like, if you could explain that.
Yeah, like pretty much. You know, you and I, we've come through these worlds where it's like when you do a lot of yoga practice and meditation practice and you start young, you assume everyone gets that training somehow, that they feel sensations in their body and they begin to build a relationship with those sensations. You know, because you're guided to do that in a yoga practice. What does it feel like when you breathe deeply into your lungs? What does it feel like when you take a different posture? I realized, and then you start to naturally learn, this was my experience, you start to naturally notice patterns in those sensations that are arising in the body, and you might notice them in relation to particular emotional experiences that you're having or life experiences. And I didn't realize that other people didn't have this capacity. And I started studying yoga and addiction, the using yoga as a tool to support people who were recovering from addiction. And addiction is like the definition of getting away from sensations. It's some way of numbing. And so many people have addictive processes going on and they don't even realize it. You know, we're watching 4 or 5 hours of television, we're shopping, whatever it is. You know, we go to the thing that takes us away from the feeling in our body, really, which is where we're experiencing the emotion. So it depends on where a person is at, but a lot of the work I do is allow people the safety to feel into their bodies, to witness the sensations because the body is constantly feeding us that information, and to feel safe to be held through it. Because if they had a childhood where they weren't resonated with, where they didn't have that person go, oh, that intense feeling in your body and that intense emotion that you're having, that's cool, I've got you, I'm here with you, then when it comes, they're like, I'm not allowed to have this, I got to squash it down. And then when they start to feel it, they want to reach for call somebody else, have a cigarette, have a beer. So having the therapist there or the coach there is that first experience of like, oh, I can sit through a strong emotion. I can sit through a strong feeling in my body and it's okay. So that's really in fairly concrete terms, there's a lot more to it. But that's the key skill. Being able to do that.
It's really interesting because what you mentioned about how the yoga, and I do remember, like, and even now, like even when I practice yoga, but I remember when I first started yoga when I was 20, I remember going to these classes, and then you start to feel things inside your body that you kind of
Yes.
weren't really aware of before. And it's like, oh, I can actually feel my spine. I can feel an organ. I can feel this and that. And it's like, yes, I really understand what you're saying there. And I think if people have practiced yoga, then that's something they can relate to. But if people haven't, then maybe that's a really interesting way of putting it. So thanks for making that
My pleasure.
really
And
obvious.
then that's it. And then so we might get, but then we get that skill. And then the reason why I went to these kind of more embodiment practices and integrating them with yoga was that next step of like, having the emotional safety built in, so that when those emotions were coming up, but when those sensations were coming up in my body, I felt really safe to be with them, and that's what I give to my clients. And sometimes in a group class with yoga, where you're not necessarily in a strong relationship with the instructor, you might not get that. And you see that happen. People are like, whoa, I don't know what this is. I'm out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads me to my next question, because all this feeling, of course, relates a little bit to the nervous system, I believe. And I know you're in deep when it comes to the nervous system. I know that's your specialty.
I'm a nervous system nerd.
I love it. It's, and being a nerd is cool. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So
got the glasses with it today.
Perfect. So in understanding how the nervous system reacts to trauma, what are some key things that you've maybe learned about that you could share with us? Like, what are some things about the nervous system that really, you went, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, how come everyone doesn't know this?
Yeah. I think the primary thing, I was having a little meditate on this before talking to you today. And again, it relates back to your original question, like why embodiment? And when you understand what the nervous system is doing, it gives you such compassion for yourself around these reactions and around these experiences that you have. So the nervous system is designed, we are biological creatures, and like all other biological creatures, our primary prerogative is survival. And that is what the nervous system is primarily responsible for. And when you get that whatever's going on, that your triggered state or these intense sensations in your body that are making you want to run away or bang something, or whatever you see, whatever you start to recognize in the patterns of your behavior, that this is a beautiful device of self-protection for your survival. And as creatures designed to engage, as well as we are, as the modern human is, if that engagement, if that experience of coming into expressing our emotions, our authentic self wasn't met, wasn't safe, then our system gave us all these strategies, all these sensations, all these methods to help us cope with that and stay safe. And I think for me, it goes a lot deeper, and I love being a nerd, but I don't want to go too complex right now into like how that actually maps through the vagus nerve and the nervous system. And because I think at a first blush, just understanding my nervous system is protecting me. The way I am reacting and responding to things is exactly as I was designed to respond and react to things. It's just that because I didn't maybe get the kind of parenting I needed, or I'm living in a stressed out society where those signals are coming in at too big a rate for me to really, really cope with and to regulate, to go, oh, threat, no, not a threat, go back to relaxed. It's like, oh, walking across the street, ambulance, threat, nervous system up, boss rings, yells at me, nervous system up, constantly. Or all overwhelmed, let's go to the collapse state. So as we begin to understand, it's doing exactly what it's meant to be. And if I can get in there consciously and go, you know what, nervous system, thank you so much for taking care of me. This isn't actually a threat, what we're encountering now. So I'm going to take a deep breath and just bring you down a few notches. So you realize, I love you for doing that for me, but we're cool. We can walk across the street here.
Yeah. And that's that embodiedness again there. Like you mentioned, taking the deep breaths and just,
yes. And that is what I found has been the key, that you can access the nervous system because neurons travel, I can't remember even with all my nerdiness, I've forgotten. It's about 438 miles an hour, I think, the speed of a neuron. So the neurons are the cells which communicate the information through the nervous system, and they go very, very fast. And they go faster than you can have a thought. So you want to give your body, your nervous system, something, because that takes over, right? It's hijacked your whole brain before you even realize. So accessing the brain with your cognition, when it's already accessing your nervous system with your cognition, with your thoughts, with your conscious rational thoughts, when you're in a heightened activated state, doesn't work, because it's probably taking that part of your brain offline anyway. So learning to embody, to access the nervous system in its own language, giving myself, so thank you, Leah, for reminding me. I'm hugging myself right now and squeezing my upper arms.
That's right.
Is a beautiful way to just get in touch with the nerve, communicate with the nervous system, and then as it starts to calm down, you can bring in cognition a little more easily.
That's great. I remember seeing a friend of mine who's also a yoga teacher do a video. So I've got a puppy and it's just banging around and eating food. So if you can hear crunching in the background, that's what it is. But I remember she did a video where she was hugging the sides of her body, and that's kind of where the gallbladder meridian is, which is part of our protective system. So that as well is another, I guess, way of connecting with that nervous system response.
That's right. There's a bunch of different modalities. People use the EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping, bilateral stimulation. So just tapping on each side of the body allows the two sides of the brain's hemispheres to be a bit more connected. And then breath, and with breath, we access the vagus nerve, with sound, with vibration coming through the body, all things that we've been doing naturally for a long time as you're in the human species, but we've never had the amount of stress and in my opinion trauma on the human nervous system, the human emotional system that we have now, in terms of disconnection, constant stimulation. Society just hasn't been like this before.
No, it's actually really interesting. You've made me think of a couple of things. I hosted a Wim Hof method workshop here. We had an instructor come and we were getting in the ice baths, and one of the ladies was here and she got in the ice bath, which is, if you've never done an ice bath, you can imagine it's quite intense, especially if you don't like cold water. And she got in and she just started humming, like we did the special Wim Hof breathing as part of it. But as she was exhaling, she was humming out. And she said she'd given birth to 3 children and she'd use that technique as she was giving birth. And so she was recruiting that technique as a way to sort of connect with her nervous system and calm herself down in that experience. So I thought that was really interesting and something worth sharing.
And it makes such sense.
All right. So we've mentioned trauma a lot, and I think trauma is something that we've all experienced on various levels. Obviously there's extreme levels of trauma, and then there's obviously the not so extreme, but stress, for example, is a type of trauma that we go through, whether that's on a day-to-day basis through our lives, through the way we're living. From my own personal experience, when I was a child, I was a selective mute. So obviously I experienced some sort of trauma. I don't know what it was, to be honest. I was too young to remember. And potentially I've actually blocked that memory out of my mind. I'm not too sure. I've never really delved into that anywhere, on a deeper level. But I did go to see a speech therapist when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And she was the one that actually introduced me to yoga. But she also gave me a few other, I guess, what are called self-regulation strategies, which I know is something that you do a lot of with yourself and your clients, and it's a big part of what you do. So I guess I'm interested to hear more about, self-regulation strategies. I think we've obviously just talked about, the breathing and the tapping and the hugging, that type of thing. But more specifically, I guess, for people who maybe have trouble communicating, whether that's, standing up and speaking in front of people or just going to a party. I mean, we're coming up to Christmas now. We're having lots of interactions with family and friends. And sometimes that can be very daunting to actually have a conversation with someone we only see once a year. Or even, communicating with a partner, or even performing, like something that you do a lot of. What kinds of self-regulation strategies do you do and do you teach to your clients that you may maybe one or two that you'd like to share that you found really
Yeah,
powerful?
beautiful. Well, one that I learned from one of my mentors that is a really nice one in terms of when you're in company. So part of the theory of the neurobiology of the nervous system is that a healthy nervous system, a well-regulated and flexible nervous system, would develop in the context of safe connection. So the most recent part of our nervous system, looked at through the poly-vagal lens, which is one of the theories that I like to really to use a lot in my work. There's a part of the nervous system complex which developed most recently. And if you think about it in terms of evolution and us being kind of like lizard-like creatures, we had the collapse response going in our body. Then we had a little bit more demand. We had the fight-flight response. And then as we began to build community and to rely upon each other, we started to develop a part of the nervous system, the social engagement aspect of the nervous system. And that develops when there is a sense, and develops healthily when there is a sense of safety and connection, when there's a sense of a good boundaried self and an other, and that other is resonant with us. So I referenced that earlier, that when we're kids, it's really that we develop that sense of self by having our emotional experiences met, resonated with, recognized, valued, validated, and made to be okay. If we don't, then we can end up kind of the expression, that expression of being thin-skinned. I quite like it. So if there's been a lot of neglect or trauma, then we don't, which most of us have to some degree, then we don't have that clear sense of where we finish and somebody else begins. And so really learning. So these ones are self-regulation, just to get a sense of, oh, I'm in my own body. Here I am. And then, okay, that's cool. I've got these sensations going through, but I'm going to go to the Christmas party and there's going to be others coming. How do I contain this and keep this going? And there's a beautiful little embodiment exercise that I learned about boundaries, and we literally use our body to draw the boundary around us. You may have seen this one as well, where you take your hands from your body and you press them forward. Yep. And you can do a little affirmation with it, like, this is my space, in front, above, and all around. And nobody's allowed in unless I invite them. And so once we set, catching my hair, once we set ourselves within our own space, it's much less likely that that interaction, that communication with a partner, or if they're getting a little emotionally dysregulated, they're not going to register so much to us as a threat. So we set ourselves up this way to be able to stay regulated. And if we get really good at it, and this is certainly what I've seen in my own life, is that and why I became a coach and a therapist is because then my nervous system is able to provide that regulatory capacity for somebody else. In terms of performing, like, you could use, it really depends. So this is why I work one-on-one and individually with people, because it depends maybe on your own individual memories, patterns of trauma, what's happened relative to your experience, if we're going to talk about visibility and performance. But that one's a great one as well, because often, I don't know if you feel like this, it's almost like when you go and be visible, be it on a video, be it on the stage, you kind of get this sense of intrusion, like other people's eyes or opinions are like intruding on you. And so setting that physical boundary, setting that emotional, cognitive, bringing in all this, like, I feel it literally physically in my body, I'm telling myself, so my brain is registering that consciously and through my cognitions, really helps you to go, oh, I'm in this space, I'm taking up this space, and they're over there. That would be one that I would use. And then another one is, honestly, Leah, I can't tell you the amount of people that I've seen start to shift when they go, oh, it's meant to happen. I'm a human being vulnerable, exposing myself on stage isn't going to feel comfortable. My nervous system is coming in to protect me. That's meant to happen. Okay, sweet. I'm going to go with it. Yeah. I'm going to go, this is meant to be happening. That instantly, when you don't react to the reaction, as we know, through other teachings,
Yeah.
then you're like instantly in a position to go, oh, cool, I'll just wait this out. And then I'll just take a deep breath. That's a beautiful one as well. Quickest. Stephen Porges, who created the poly-vagal theory, basically asserts that the breath is the quickest way in towards a regulatory experience for the nervous system. So those two, or three rather, the boundaries, reminding yourself that it's natural that this is happening and is exactly what's meant to be happening. Not, oh my God, I'm having nerves and it shouldn't be happening. Of course you should.
Yeah.
Sweet. And now I'm trying to do something beyond my comfort zone. So I'm going to let my nervous system have this. Thank you for freaking out. You were meant to freak out.
Yeah.
And now we want to go further than that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing those. That's perfect. And it actually just reminded me of when I did a workshop earlier this year at a yoga festival, for want of a better word. Room of 30 odd people, never met before. And I was leading a workshop, and I'd not done that, in a large group before. Not that that's necessarily that large, but it's large enough. So, and I remember I was getting all shaky, and I was like, but it was exciting, but I was nervous, and, I could sense that reaction taking place in my body, which you described perfectly. So yeah, it's definitely just, accepting that is part of performing or, presenting or showing up to other people. It's not meant to be a walk in the park. If it doesn't scare you, then you're not going to grow, So,
and then eventually over time, if you've had in psychology, they call it a corrective emotional experience. So if you have enough experiences where there's a good outcome and you felt safe performing, it will start to register differently in your nervous system over time. And that's been my experience. So, I really appreciate you asking, because this was, in a way, my testing ground for it. Was like, all my life I wanted to perform, but I was in the bedroom with the guitar singing, hiding away from everybody.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years of applying the embodiment tools to the performance context to really work it out and go, yep. And now, and have enough experiences and walk myself through all those processes and regulate and do the thing.
Yeah.
And now it feels mostly pretty easy.
Yeah. More exciting perhaps than the nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it feels kind of free. I feel like I have this capacity to, because I can regulate quite quickly, then it's more like a playful, how do I use the skills that I've developed to express myself to the maximum capacity that I literally have in my skill set and in my body, with the throat and the guitar playing, rather than having to manage myself.
Yeah. God, this is great. And not wanting to turn this into a therapy session for myself, but you just made me realize something, like when you're saying, when you have a positive experience as a result of that. So for me, I know, in past relationships, for instance, if I tried to express myself about something, it wasn't necessarily a positive experience that I had, that created some sort of conflict or confrontation. And so that would make me shut off more and avoid having those, sharing my feelings. So yeah, so it's made me think, all right, so looking forwards to new relationships, how can I use some of these tools we talked about today and try and make those experiences more positive, and what's the setting that needs to exist in, and what support systems need to be in place for that to become a positive experience as well. So yeah.
Well, please don't apologize for going deep, because I'm thrilled to hear you say that. And that's one of the really beautiful and significant applications of this work, is for people trying to build, because we've become so disconnected from each other as a species, that we're not really offering to each other safe space, right? So safe connection. And what you're talking about there is, and it's so much about authentic expression, and okay, I want to express who I am. And through the poly-vagal lens, if we encounter somebody who's able to really be present for that, and for us to feel we have a positive outcome through it, that's an experience of what they call co-regulation, as opposed to self-regulation. And that is often the reason why we will seek out a coach first, is because that will give us, that'll be the corrective emotional experience. That'll be the context in which I express myself to this person. The relationship is intact. I feel really safe and validated. Often we we need to do it in the therapeutic context because
Yeah.
there's so much at stake.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here I get to practice. This is a professional. They know how to do it. But there's a genuine, if it's a good therapist, it's a real relationship. You're
Yeah.
building a genuine relationship. So
Yeah.
you have it there, and then you begin, and I'll get deep and I'll divulge. For myself, it was with a therapist many, many years ago who gave me that first experience of it. Because the thing is, if you've never had it as well, there's no map for it in your brain.
No.
So your synaptic connections don't register. People are almost automatically going to be a little bit of a threatening experience to you. Vulnerability is going to be a threatening experience.
Yeah.
And so that first encounter with someone who gives you the feeling of resonance, of safety, of like, you've just expressed yourself and I love you and I'm here and it's all good. You get an imprint like, okay, that's what that feels like. And then as you begin to equip yourself, like you were talking about, you're like, okay, I kind of know now through my body what it maybe is going to feel like and how to offer it to somebody else, how to create it, how to teach them, how to request it, how to recognize it when it's available.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. That's really, I get it. It's really big stuff though. And I think it's an area where a lot of people struggle. I know I've struggled with it forever. So I'm still working on it. Yeah. So it's great to know that, people like you are helping people.
It's a beautiful, in terms of partnerships, it's a really useful lens and a language. It can be fairly complex initially. So, learning it together, understanding, we are co-regulating. I'm keeping my nervous system in this space, like learning how to do that for each other. There's a really simple thing. So if you have the intention, because sometimes we don't mean to not be safe for the other person. I've certainly witnessed that. It's not coming from an intentional thing, but maybe we're doing something that triggers the other person because it reminds them of whatever.
Yeah.
Or we're a little disconnected from the indicators of safety. So the social engagement system and the ventral vagal and the poly-vagal, so the social engagement complex of the nervous system, goes up into the face. So often what we communicate when we're communicating safety is through a soft tone of voice, is through a soft face. And you can learn to do this, and therapists do it naturally, and you can teach couples to do it for each other. When the other person is speaking, you soften, and you give the indicators, because even if you're not judging or criticizing, but your face is a little neutral and you're sitting across from someone who's had traumas and they're highly vigilant and they've never had affirmation and recognition, that still face is going to feel quite uncomfortable. So we learn how to cultivate the expression of warmth towards the other person.
Yeah, wow. Bit of mirror work there, as in looking in the mirror and practicing.
A beautiful way to start. Absolutely. And to notice whether you can handle it or not. Because many of us then the next phase comes where you get the love and you can't handle it because, again, your nervous system's not used to that either. So that starts to register as a threat. So it's constantly moving towards these new experiences, little drops at a time, learning how to regulate through it, learning how to reshape and teach the nervous system, this is safe. This is what safety feels like. Because if you never had safety, it's unfamiliar. Anything unfamiliar registers as a threat. So you start to build safety, or you encounter somebody safe, but they register as a threat. So
Yeah. Wow. Oh, okay. That's really cool.
More chats to come.
Oh, indeed. I mean, I'm just going to put a plug here for one of my previous episodes, which was called Mirror, Mirror, The Way to Self-Love. And it describes a mirror exercise that I learned when I did an online course. So I'll put a link back to that in the show notes for anyone who might want to be interested in doing some work in the mirror to, improve your sense of self and self-worth and commitment to your progression through life. Anyway, we're running out of time. So I'd just like to wrap up now. And I mean, you've already shared so much. So thank you. But I know you're about to do some more work in the new year. This is being recorded at the end of 2021 on embodied envisioning. So this is your sort of goal setting and which we can do any time of the year. I mean, goal setting is, basically you can set goals every day, and it doesn't have to be at the start of the year or the end of the year. It can basically be every day of your life we're setting goals. But I'm curious to hear just a little bit about what you're planning to do with that, because, and I think it's something that you touch on in your vision, which you said earlier, is like empowering people to live the lives they actively choose rather than reactively inherit. So I think there's something around that. Is that sort of where that's going?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reactively inherit means we come through lines of generational traumas, through a society that doesn't honor the authentic expression of the human individual. So we come in to the world protecting ourselves constantly, and then most of us create a sense of self that's built out of a series of reactions and managing and coping with our environment. And then from that place we go, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my family? What am I going to do with my social life, with my health, with my And when we start to dig into many of those intentions that we set or goals that we set, are often coming from that place. I need to get love, or I need to get approval, or I need to keep myself safe, or I need to not get criticized, or it's some kind of protective intention that's coming through. So what I'm teaching people to do is go, right, let's put that down for a second, and let's go into the body, and together in hopefully my presence, I'm very comfortable in this space now with my capacity to hold safe space for you to be in your body and to move into the space of openness, safety, connection, possibility. What do you feel and imagine for yourself from that place? So when you begin to live into the state, and what would bring more of that into your life, let's go there. That's the kind of simplified version.
Excellent. All right. So so when are you actually hosting this?
It's going to be at 2 p.m. Well,
first time.
Yeah. I'm hosting it at 2 p.m. So my idea is, you get up on New Year's Day, and some people may have stayed up till midnight and be quite tired. But then you kind of, I notice a lot of people are kind of kicking around in the afternoon, a bit of a loose end, like, okay, what do we do now? And it's the new day. And so that time in the afternoon, I'm offering a space to, okay, let's get comfortable, let's get intentional, let's think about those intentions that you're setting for the new year, and notice how people joke about it all the time. How many times have you set those intentions and they're not followed through? That's because you don't know how to regulate your nervous system through the threats that are presented, or your goals aren't really even authentic in the first place because you were doing them from a fearful state. So let's check out the state that you do them from, and let's put in place, this will be the last part of the workshop, is like, okay, how are you going to manage yourself through, if a goal is, for example, to become more visible and do a performance, what do you need in place in terms of learning to use your trauma-informed regulation strategies in super techie language to get through that, right? To get through those moments and not give up. So, and people judge themselves for these, self-sabotage cycles. It's like, no, these are beautiful protective mechanisms that you've got in place, and we're just wanting to tweak and work your way through them. So, 2 p.m.
Perth time, which is about 5 p.m. Sydney, Melbourne time. Right. And that's even achievable for people probably in the UK, Europe time zone as well. So so that's the first one. And if I have a few clients in America, so if there's some interest from America, I'll run one on the next day, probably in my morning, which will be their evening. But the first one, that's doable for Europeans for their morning on the 1st, and everything will get recorded. So it's a free to attend, and if you can't come, there's a small fee just to cover my costs for like recording and producing and putting it out. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to join. I think that's going to be my New Year's Day gift to myself.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, it'll be so great to have you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Really looking forward to it. All right. Wow. Well, we've covered so much today, Mira. It's been a pleasure having you here. I usually ask my guests to just give us one thing that they've learnt throughout their life that's helped them improve wellness and get more out of life. Is there anything you'd like to add on that? Because you've already shared so much, that one quick little tidbit of something that might be helpful.
Yeah, I had to think about this one, and I was like thinking through, how would I express this? Because it is very cheesy and corny, and it's like, learn to love yourself. But the message that I want to add to that is that what that will be for you, how you will get there, will be completely individual to each person. And don't give up. There will be a modality, there will be a way that you can find that will work for you, that will get you through. For me, it was understanding my biology. I am also very spiritual, but just telling myself I'm perfect as I am, I'm a creature of God or the universe, and it's meant to be, didn't quite cut it. When I started to learn that I was biologically designed to be that way, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, that shifted everything. So keep going until you find your thing that shifts it for you. Keep going. It is available.
Beautiful. That's such, I love that. I love that, because there's so much out there and everyone's different, you know? So yeah, find what works for you and cultivate that. Thank you so much, Mira. I've enjoyed our discussion today. Thank you. And I look forward to catching you on New Year's Day and onto 2022 as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leah. I really appreciate it.
All right. Bye.